Atlanta's most elegant Korean fusion restaurant was silent that night. Not because business was slow, but because Mr. Hanjun Park had just walked in. Every waiter froze. Every fork stopped midair. Even the music died down as if the speakers themselves were afraid. They called him the Silent Storm, a billionaire whose temper could ruin a man's career before dessert. He sat at table number 5, his eyes sharp like glass, his jaw clenched. A single wrong move, and someone would lose their job tonight. When a young waiter accidentally spilled a few drops of wine on the tablecloth, the air cracked. Mr. Park's voice sliced through the restaurant, cold, hard, merciless. Is this what you call service? Do you people even know what perfection looks like? The waiter's hands trembled. Nobody dared step in. Nobody, except one. From the corner, a calm voice rose, soft but steady. Maybe perfection isn't what you need, sir. Maybe you just need to breathe. Everyone turned. A black waitress, Amara Johnson, stood there, holding a tray close to her chest, her eyes gentle but fearless. The billionaire blinked, stunned that anyone dared speak to him that way. And in that moment, the restaurant that feared him most witnessed something no one expected. The first crack in a heart made of stone. The next morning at Ciore's Soul Fusion, the kitchen buzzed with nervous whispers. Amara Johnson stood at the prep counter, tying her apron, pretending not to notice the way everyone glanced at her, and then quickly looked away. "Girl, you got a death wish or something?" whispered Tanya, the hostess. "You really talked back to him?" Amara smiled softly. "I didn't talk back. I just talked." Tanya shook her head. "That man could buy this whole building and shut it down before lunch. You think he's gonna forget that you embarrassed him?" Amara looked up, her brown eyes calm, almost peaceful. "If speaking kindness is embarrassing, then maybe he needed to hear it more than I needed to stay safe." Meanwhile, on the 38th floor of Han Global Investments, the man himself stood before a wall of glass. The Atlanta skyline glittered beneath him, 1,000 tiny lives moving in patterns he could control with a single decision. Or, at least he used to think so. But last night, a waitress's voice had followed him home. "Maybe perfection isn't what you need, sir. Maybe you just need to breathe." He had replayed that line in his head through every silence. He hated how it made sense. He hated how seen he'd felt. Hanjun Park hadn't felt seen in years. He closed his laptop with a snap, the reflection of his own cold eyes staring back at him. That evening, he returned. The same restaurant, the same table, the same tension in the air. But this time he didn't yell. He didn't even order right away. He just sat there, watching the staff from behind that wall of control, until Amara appeared again, her steady hands carrying a pot of tea. "Good evening, Mr. Park," she said gently, setting the cup before him. "No wine tonight?" He looked up sharply. "You remember my order?" "I remember your tone," she replied, her voice neither sharp nor mocking. "And I thought maybe tea would be easier on the soul." He blinked. For a moment his armor slipped. "You assume I have one." "I don't assume," she said softly. "I hope." The silence stretched between them, heavy, fragile. Finally he spoke. "You're brave. Or foolish." Amara smiled faintly. "Maybe both. But someone has to remind you you're still human." That line struck him harder than he cared to admit. For the first time in a long while, Han didn't have a reply. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Park kept coming back. Not every day, not even regularly, but enough for the staff to whisper. Each time he ordered the same tea. Each time, Amara served him with the same calm grace. And slowly something began to shift. One evening, as the restaurant emptied out, she found him still sitting there long after closing. His phone lay untouched, his posture slouched, his gaze distant. "You ever stop moving, Mr. Park?" she asked, wiping a table nearby. He didn't look up. "Moving is all I know. When you stop, the memories catch up." She hesitated. "Maybe they're not chasing you. Maybe they're waiting to be heard." That made him glance up, eyes cold, but softening. "You talk like you've seen things." Amara chuckled quietly. "Honey, I've lived things." He almost smiled. Almost a few days later, as Amara polished silverware, the restaurant manager, Mr. Kim, pulled her aside. "You have to stop engaging with him," he said in a low, urgent tone. "He's not your project, Amara. That man's dangerous. Emotionally unstable." She crossed her arms. "You ever think maybe that's exactly why he needs someone to listen?" Mr. Kim sighed. "You can't fix rich men with kind words." She smiled. "You'd be surprised what kindness can fix." That night, a storm broke over Atlanta, thunder rumbling like an omen. Han Park sat at his table again, rain streaking the glass behind him. The restaurant was nearly empty, but Amara stayed late, refilling his tea without a word. After a while, he asked quietly, "Do you have children?" "I did," she said, voice steady but soft. "A boy. Malik. He was 12 when I lost him." The billionaire froze. "Lost him?" "Leukemia," she said simply. We fought hard, but sometimes life don't fight fair. He looked down. For once, he didn't know what to say. Amara smiled faintly. After that, I promised myself something, that I'd never let pain make me cruel. Pain already takes enough. Han's throat tightened. And you think that's what I am? Cruel? She met his gaze. I think you're hurting. And you've been alone so long. You started calling it power. He flinched because she was right. For years, Han Park had turned grief into profit, loneliness into authority. He thought control would keep him safe. But now, this woman, this stranger, was peeling away every layer he'd built to hide from himself. The next week, he didn't come in, nor the week after. Amara told herself it didn't matter. People like him, they always ran when kindness got too close. But on the third week, a package arrived at the restaurant addressed to her. Inside was a small porcelain teapot, Korean celadone, delicate, handmade, and a note in neat handwriting. For the tea that made me listen. HJP. She smiled softly, whispering, So, you were listening. 2 nights later, the door swung open again. Han Park walked in, no bodyguards, no phone, no suit jacket. Just him. He sat at the same table and waited. When Amara came over, she smiled. Tea again? Actually, he hesitated. Whatever you're drinking tonight. She raised a brow. You sure? It's chamomile and honey. Sweet, not fancy. Maybe that's what I need. As they sat quietly, he said, When my wife died, I told myself I'd never feel anything again. I thought if I stayed angry, I'd stay strong. Amara nodded. And did it work? He stared into the cup. It kept people away. She leaned forward. Maybe that's what broke you, Mr. Park. You mistook being untouchable for being unbreakable. The words hit him deep. He laughed bitterly. Do you practice these speeches, or do they just fall out of you? They fall, she said, smiling. But maybe they land where they're supposed to. From that night on, he began to change. Not dramatically, not like a miracle, but slowly. He started greeting the staff. He started tipping, not out of pity, but gratitude. He even apologized twice, something no one believed possible. And every time Amara caught his eye, she saw less of the storm, more of the man trying to find his way out of it. One late afternoon, he asked, Do you believe people like me can change? Amara looked at him, eyes filled with quiet certainty. Change, she said. Honey, I've seen broken bones heal. I've seen hearts restart after the machine said they couldn't. People don't need to change who they are. They need to remember who they were before the pain. He swallowed hard. For the first time, he didn't feel like a billionaire. He felt human. And that scared him more than anything. That night, after he left, Amara found something under his teacup, a folded photograph. It showed a young Korean girl with bright eyes and a half-missing front tooth. On the back, a note. My daughter. Seoul, 2011. She looked at it for a long time, whispering, You've got a lot of love still waiting for you, Mr. Park. She didn't know that the next day, he'd be boarding a flight, heading back to Seoul for the first time in a decade, to find the child he'd left behind. The Seoul skyline glimmered like liquid silver as the plane descended through the fog. For 10 years, Han Park had sworn he'd never come back. Not to the city. Not to the memories. Not to the grave of the woman who once loved him and the daughter who had once called him Appa. But there he was, standing on Korean soil again. Not as a billionaire, not as a man of power, but as someone searching for what he'd lost. 3 days later, Amara received a postcard at the restaurant. It had no return address, just the image of the Namsan Tower at sunset. On the back, 3 words written in firm, careful script. I'm trying, finally, she smiled, pressing the card to her heart. For the first time in years, she prayed, not for herself, but for him. Han's car stopped in front of a small art school on the edge of Seoul. Through the glass windows, he saw her, Sumin, 12 years old, sitting cross-legged on the floor, sketching. She had her mother's eyes, and his quiet intensity. His hands trembled as he stepped inside. The teacher noticed him, then whispered something to the girl. She looked up. Their eyes met. She didn't smile. She didn't run to him. She just stared, curious, cautious, distant. You're him, she said softly. Yes, Han whispered. I'm him. There were no hugs. No dramatic music. Just 2 people standing in the same air for the first time in a decade, unsure whether to bridge the distance or protect it. They sat outside on a bench. The autumn wind carried the faint scent of roasted chestnuts from a nearby stall. I thought you were dead, Sumin said. Sometimes I wished I was, he admitted. Then why now? Hans stared at the horizon. Because someone reminded me that hiding isn't healing. The woman from America? He nodded. Amara. She saw through me. The girl's eyes softened slightly. Did she tell you to find me? No. She told me to forgive myself. Silence. Then, softly, Sumin said, You missed a lot. He smiled sadly. Every moment. Amma said you used to paint, she added quietly. Han blinked. I haven't touched a brush since. Then maybe it's time. She reached into her backpack and handed him a small sketchbook. The first page was blank. You can start here, she said. He swallowed hard. Thank you, Suman. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a beginning. Back in Atlanta, weeks passed. The restaurant felt emptier without him. But then one evening, a delivery arrived, a thick envelope with Korean stamps. Amara opened it carefully. Inside were two things. A letter, a photograph of Han and his daughter, both smiling faintly, paint smudges on their hands. The letter read, Amara, you once told me pain doesn't have to make us cruel. I believed you. And now, I've learned that forgiveness doesn't have to be loud. Suman and I are rebuilding, one sketch at a time. You said kindness fixes more than money ever could. You were right. When I was a boy, my mother used to say that love is like ink. If you write it softly, it lasts longer. I think I finally understand what she meant. Thank you for teaching me how to breathe again. Han-Jun Park. Tears slipped down Amara's cheeks. She set the letter down beside the teapot he'd once gifted her. Guess you really did learn to breathe, she whispered. Ciore's soul fusion had changed. The music was softer, the laughter louder, and behind the counter hung a framed photograph. Mr. Han, Amara, and Suman, all smiling in front of a canvas covered in paint splatters. That evening, the restaurant hosted a charity dinner for underprivileged kids, fully funded by the Han and Johnson Foundation, a new nonprofit supporting young artists from both Korea and America. The staff worked with a joy that hadn't been seen in years. Even Tanya, who used to call him the Storm, laughed as she served plates. Amara stood by the door, dressed neatly, watching as guests arrived. Then she heard the familiar voice. I hope you saved me a table. She turned, and there he was, Han-Jun Park. No longer in a tailored suit. No longer carrying the weight of guilt in his shoulders. He wore a simple navy shirt, sleeves rolled up, and a quiet smile that reached his eyes. You came back, Amara said, her throat tightening. You didn't think I'd miss my own foundation's opening, did you? She laughed, shaking her head. You always did love dramatic entrances. He looked around. It feels different here. Because you left your storm behind, she said softly. He smiled. No, I just learned to walk through it. Later that evening, Han stood before the crowd. Dozens of guests, donors, and artists listened as he cleared his throat. For years, he began, I thought power was the only way to stay safe. But power without compassion is just another kind of cage. He paused, eyes scanning the room until they found Amara. A few months ago, a woman reminded me that anger isn't strength, it's pain in disguise. She taught me that kindness doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. The crowd applauded softly. He smiled, lowering the microphone. So tonight, this isn't about me. It's about second chances, the ones we give and the ones we accept. After the event, Amara joined him outside under the twinkling Atlanta skyline. They stood in comfortable silence, the city lights reflecting off the glass windows of his car. You know, Amara said, I never thought I'd see you smile like that. You never thought I could, he teased. I thought you'd need a miracle. Turns out I just needed you, he said quietly. She looked at him, smiling. Don't go turning poetic on me now. He chuckled. Too late. Weeks later, the restaurant ran smoother than ever. Han visited often, not as an owner, but as family. He'd sit by the corner table sketching, while Suman helped in the kitchen, and Amara told stories that made everyone laugh. And one rainy evening, Amara found a note under her cup, just like old times. You spoke once, and it changed everything. If kindness had a voice, it would sound like yours. HJP. She folded the note, smiling through tears. Guess that voice finally got through, she whispered. Months later, a little boy walked into the restaurant holding his mother's hand. He was shy, quiet, maybe 8 years old. Amara knelt down and smiled. Hey there, baby. You hungry? He nodded. Then you're in the right place, she said, leading him to a table. Han watched from across the room, smiling softly. Amara glanced back at him, their eyes meeting. Two souls who had found peace not through wealth, but through grace. The narrator's voice fades in. In a world full of noise and power, sometimes it takes just one soft voice to break the silence. Everyone feared the angry billionaire, until the little black girl spoke up.